When I think about my favorite run-and-gun shooters growing up, I of course picture Contra, Gunstar Heroes, and even the arcade version of Midnight Resistance with the rotary joystick. But if you grew up in Europe, then there's another name that defined this exciting genre, and that of course is Turrican. This was the 1990 action game that played out like a mashup between Contra and Metroid, offering massive stages to explore and tons of aliens to annihilate. The franchise bounced from the Commodore 64 to the Amiga before eventually landing on both the Super NES and Genesis. And while it was never a huge hit here in the United States, Turrican inspired countless developers and is even partially responsible for Duke Nukem. Now, 3 decades after the iconic game was first released, the series returns with Turrican Flashback, a fantastic new compilation that includes 4 of the franchise's best games. We see it go from a humble yet impressive computer game to a confident console powerhouse, complete with an improved control scheme, a much-needed rewind button, and all the cheats intact. It's a must-own for anybody who grew up loving the over-the-top action of Turrican. But can an American with relatively little nostalgia for the franchise still get into it? That's what I want to find out. Now, in case you've never heard of Turrican, it was a run-and-gun shooter developed by Manfred Trenz that originally came out on the Commodore 64 before getting an updated port on Amiga computers. This led to a number of popular sequels, including a second Amiga game, which was reworked for America to be a Universal Soldier tie-in, as well as Mega Turrican on the Genesis, and 2 Super Turrican games on the Super NES. Many of these games were developed by Factor 5, the German developer that would later go on to port Contra the Alien Wars to the Game Boy before finding worldwide success with Star Wars Rogue Squadron. Maybe you've heard of it. Now, unlike most run-and-gun shooters, Turrican has always been more about the exploration than simply running from left to right shooting bad guys. All 4 of the games featured in this compilation feature massive stages to investigate, often to the point where it's not always clear where you're supposed to be going. Many of these stages are just as vertical as they are horizontal, having us platform our way up into the sky and swim down below the surface. They're filled with multiple paths, secret areas, and ugly boss creatures. It all leads to a surprisingly long adventure that you can play and replay in many different ways. The 4 games we get in this collection include the 16-bit version of the original Turrican, the 1991 hit Turrican II: The Final Fight, the Genesis spin-off Mega Turrican, and the Super NES classic Super Turrican. These are 4 exciting shooters that show a growing franchise not only learning from their mistakes, but experimenting every step of the way. Mega Turrican, for example, mixes things up with a helpful grappling hook straight out of Bionic Commando, while Super Turrican offers its own spin on things by giving our hero the ability to freeze enemies. None of these games radically change up the formula, but each offers something unique that allows them to stand out individually. So, as an American who came to the Turrican franchise late, I was happy to finally have a chance to go back to the start and play through the original game. As expected, this was the hardest installment to go back to. It's a punishingly difficult platformer that definitely shows its age, especially when it comes to unexpected hits and cheap deaths. Enemies will fly out from nowhere and give you only a second to react, zapping our hero of all or at least most of his health. Thankfully, this collection makes all 4 games a lot more accessible by adding a new rewind button that allows us to undo every mistake. Now look, I know, I get it. The very thought of a rewind button is going to annoy a lot of lifelong fans and Turrican purists. But as far as I'm concerned, this simple addition fixes a lot of the more outdated design decisions found in the first couple of games. It allows me to explore the well-crafted worlds without the fear of cheap and unfair deaths. I mean, for those of us who haven't memorized every level and every enemy location, this really is a great feature that makes the series a lot more accessible for newcomers. Then hey, if you're a purist who can't wait to go into the comments and tell me to get good, then take a breath and remember that the rewind button is completely optional. You don't have to push it if you don't want to. Now, many of the cheap deaths and questionable design decisions found in the first game were remedied in the sequel, Turrican II: The Final Fight. This follow-up has better level designs, cooler bosses, and even a fun shoot-'em-up section. It's an all-around better game that deserved all the praise that it received back in the day. Sure, it's still punishing and doesn't really add much to the formula beyond polish, but it's great finally being able to play this game without seeing Jean-Claude Van Damme's undead face. The third game in the collection is Mega Turrican, which was also my introduction to the franchise as a kid. It was originally released on the Genesis in 1994, and this port doesn't miss a beat. This is a ferociously exciting action game with great sprite designs and a cool new gimmick. By giving our hero a bionic commando-style grappling hook, we're able to traverse the massive stages like never before. It adds a lot of skill to the gameplay and really shakes the series up in a fun way. I mean, it may be nostalgia talking, but Mega Turrican remains my favorite game in this series. Of course, that's not to take anything from the final game in the package, Super Turrican. This Super NES installment ditches the grappling hook and replaces it with a freeze ray. It's easily the best looking of the 4 games in the collection, and it's fun seeing some of the iconic bosses recreated with Mode 7 effects. But the freeze ray isn't all that interesting, and the level designs rely too much on narrow corridors and bottomless pits. Although I ended up liking Mega Turrican and the Final Fight the most, all 4 games are worth playing. This is one of the rare video game collections where every single entry demands your attention. And thanks to a brand new control scheme that utilizes every button on the pad, controlling the game has never been easier and more intuitive. From firing secondary weapons to dropping bombs to rolling up into a tiny little ball just like Samus, a lot is being asked of the controller. Once you play the game this way, you're never gonna wanna go back. Trust me. As a compilation, Turrican Flashback gets so much right. It has a slick menu that's easy to use, as well as enough customization for the display to make almost anybody happy. Yeah, it doesn't go into the history or give us that much context, but the developers have included everything else. They've even printed out cheat codes and added save states, and that's on top of the rewind button that we've already talked about. This package does an excellent job of giving the hardcore fans what they want, while also being inviting enough to get a whole new generation of gamers addicted to Turrican. The only real downside of this compilation is that it's not as comprehensive as it should be. It features 4 great games, but where's Super Turrican II? Or what about that weird Nintendo Entertainment System version of Super Turrican that mashed the first 2 installments into one explosive action game? It also would have been fun to play some of the alternate versions, such as switching between the Commodore 64 and Amiga versions of the original 1990 game. There are just so many ports and versions of Turrican that it's a shame that only 4 of them show up in this compilation. But even though it may not be comprehensive, Turrican Flashback makes a strong case for this classic franchise. All 4 games not only look and play great, but they're also filled with some of the best video game music you'll ever hear. It's worth buying the collection just for Chris Hulsbeck's brilliant score. It's that good. Yeah, this collection's gonna make you yearn for a new Turrican game. If only so that we can get more incredible music. by combining the best elements from Contra and Metroid, Turrican won over an entire generation of run-and-gun fans in the 1990s. Now, it's back thanks to Turrican Flashback, an exciting new compilation that features the iconic original, as well as Turrican II, the final fight, Mega Turrican, and of course, Super Turrican. This is a slick package that has thought of just about everything, including a rewind button, cheat codes, and save states. Sure, it's missing some games, and the difficulty can be punishing at times. But Turrican Flashback is a fantastic collection that shows us why the franchise is beloved by so many people. If you love run-and-gun shooters, then Turrican is for you. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is a cult classic series that you wish more people would play? Oh man, there's so many examples of great games that most people ignored. So I can't wait to see what you come up with in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back later this week with reviews of both Terratopia and the USB drive found in the grass. What the hell is that? Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,